Hey, super awesome listeners. Welcome back to part 2 of Jenn's interview with authors Jay Watson and Kyle Wiltshire. We rejoined them right when Kyle's about to give his first pick.
Now we've gotten a little peek, a little glimpse into Jay's musical inspiration. So now we're gonna pop over to Kyle here and tell us about your first pick. What was the first song that you chose for the show today?
Well, let me say this. Again, I've already kind of made reference to how Jay and I are different. And we couldn't be more different in our musical taste. Like Jay is always on the leading edge of things. He's trying to discover new groups, and I'm not painting myself in the best light here on this podcast today, but man, I'm kind of prone to hanging out on the porch and saying, "Get off my lawn," like I'm like, I'm like, if it's not 20 years old, it's probably not any good, like that's kind of my take on things. So you'll see that in the songs that I have selected. But the first song that I chose is Sunday Bloody Sunday by U2. And I chose specifically the live version from the Under a Blood Red Sky album, because that is the very first, as far as I can remember, and I've got an elephant memory. I can remember stuff. I remember the very first time I ever heard U2, and it was that song. I was sitting in my best friend's room. We were playing Nintendo together in the 80s, and from his brother's room. And his brother was like 15. We were 10. He was 15. He was so cool. Like he was the coolest guy. From his room, I hear this sound, and it was like, I was just drawn to it. And so moth to flame, so I start wandering down to his room, and I go in there and I'm listening, and I hear the roar of this crowd, and I hear this voice, this Irish voice say, "There's been a lot of talk about this next song, maybe too much talk. This song is not a rebel song. This song is Sunday, Bloody Sunday." And it goes into that drum beat, and at that point in my life, I was a drummer. And so I'm like, what am I listening? I was ready to march to war. I didn't even know what it's about. It just was like somebody took a syringe full of U2 and just shot it into my veins. And from then on, that was my first introduction, my real kind of like, this is it. Like I pledged my musical allegiance to U2 for the rest of my life. That came a little bit later, but like that introduction, the memory of that, hearing that song, those drums, that guitar, Bono's voice, everything about it, the roar of the crowd, like, it just sucked me in. So yeah, my first song today is Sunday Bloody Sunday by U2.
Yeah, it's such a good song. And I love the War album that it originally appeared on and this live version. And it was funny. I was like, I got to know why this version, like why this specific version of the song. But what I will tell you is, even though they're very similar, you don't get like, sometimes in a live version, you'll get like a big like instrumental break or, something like that. You don't get that necessarily in this. But what I love is that whether it's the way he's egging on the crowd, or there's a couple of times in the song, even in the version that's on War, where he says like, "Let's go," he's singing and calls it out. I feel like in this live version from Under the Blood Red Sky, you can hear Bono performing, right?
Yeah.
Like you get a sense of like how electric he is as a performer. And if you've never seen U2 live, that's one of those bands like you've got to go. Like before you can't, you have to go and see U2 live. Like there is a very like a strange magic that Bono brings that I love every time. And the Edge too. I mean, the whole band is great. They've been playing together for so long now that they're, it's just a wonder to watch them all together. But I do love that in this version, you really can hear what a performer Bono is, and how he's got the crowd in the palm of his hand the entire, almost 6 minutes that this song is playing. Like it's brilliant to me. And then I've always loved to, this is one of my favorite U2 songs. I'm also a fan. And although I tend to love the oft-hated Octune Baby album.
No, that's number one. That is number one.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. I feel like I get a lot of slack from U2 fans about that one, but it's my favorite also. But I love that this song originally came out on the War album in 1983. And there's a line in it that says, "And it's true we are immune when fact is fiction and TV reality." Like that was 40 years ago and is still maybe the most true line ever in a song. Again, like, wow, that's mind-blowing to me that they captured that so many years ago and it still rings true.
He so many times you read through his lyrics has people always say the Simpsons prophesy things, like he prophesied things. He invented reality TV with that lyric. I don't know if anyone attributed it to Bono, but they should, because he created it when he said that line, but there's so many other times when his lyrics have been sort of like, whoa, how did he know that was happening? But I mean, that song is, U2 is always fond of like the self-deprecating kind of thing, and they always say, when they started, they couldn't play anyone else's songs, so they had to write their own. And that's why they got so huge, and it was the live performance that really put them over the edge. That they're one of the few bands that,
I heard that the edge. I heard that. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, that wasn't intentional. That was accidental. But they're one of the few bands who when you go hear them live, maybe this isn't true for a lot of bands, but I know a lot of people would prefer to hear them live than to hear the studio recordings, to hear the albums. A lot of people are like, I'd much rather hear the live version than the studio version. And even when they do themes and variations, Sunday Bloody Sunday is a great example of that. The Pop Mart tour '97, Edge came out and played it by himself on the stage, on the B stage, just him and the guitar. The big drum. The big drum sound never happened, and it was sort of just this movement in that show. And then they've done it in other ways, in the Innocence tour in 2014, Larry came out with like a marching snare, and played it. It was just all the different ways that they have, used that song, and every way they've done it, it's always good because it's such a great song.
It is. And again, like they are such great performers. And that sort of, again, leads me back to a question about the book here is I'm curious, again, you guys pull in so many of the dead rock stars from all genres. I don't want people to think, just that it's just some of the mainstream people that you'd think of. Like you guys pull in so many. Like I was hard pressed to think of somebody that you forgot even. And so
don't worry. People have let us know. They've let us know.
I'm sure. But I was curious, like when you're coming up with dialogue, did you guys watch like old performances or old interview footage, or did you really just rely on gut? Like this is how I think, Jimi Hendrix would carry on a conversation now, or back in, at late 1990s. Or did you just like, how much did you rely on your own imagination of what these would be like versus like real live footage and interviews of these rock stars, these legends?
Yeah, so we did do research, and I've kind of used this analogy a lot, but I mean, we knew that it's impossible because these are all real people, real lives, real families, real stories, so there's absolutely no way we could hit an absolute bullseye, completely, perfectly, totally embodied them, but we wanted to hit the target, we wanted to be near. So, we kind of both took different routes, and Jay can talk about, he read a lot of biographies. Jay took in a lot of information about a lot of these folks. I was more on I'm going to listen to YouTube interviews and try to get a feel for, their speech pattern. And that was one of the things, in the editorial process, someone's like, hey, you need to differentiate a little bit so we can know who's speaking. And that's when we really dove into those interviews and listened to those interviews and thought, man, how does that person talk? He talks a lot more like philosophical, or he's always every time he talks, it's short clipped sentences. It's not, long soliloquies, those sort of things. So we try to pick up on those little things just to hit that target. Maybe not a bullseye, but hit the target of this is pretty close to a similarity of who they were, Jay, I don't know what you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would also say that we, for all of these people, essentially have a caricature of them, like in the real, like in our lives and the experience that we have of them. We don't really know exactly what they were like. We just know what we were presented. And for some of these folks that were older, where we don't quite have as much technology, there is a lot of books written. There's a lot of history written about them. And you're able to kind of understand a personality profile quite a bit. In fact, I don't know if you've ever taken a Myers-Briggs test, but like in those, I think Elvis was a ENFP or something like that in Myers-Briggs. Like
right.
they make these determinations based on personality. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand the caricature. And then one of our favorite things that we got to do was many of these people died in very sad situations. And we were able to give them new life. We were able to give them a second chance. And so what would they be like with a different perspective on life? For them, the majority of them, I don't know if they would say it this way, but they lived a life where the world was very good to them. They used their talents and the world celebrated them. And so they enjoyed the goodness of the world in some ways. And some of them maybe a little too much, they enjoyed it. But we gave them a chance to maybe give back to that world by faking their deaths, by having a new start, by, maybe in some very light aspect, and you can attest to this, but in some aspects, we talk a little bit about what it's like to do rehab and live in that kind of community. What would they be like then? What would they be like that then plus 20 years or plus 5 years? Or what would be like if they lived in community with these people and actually, had people that protected them and cared about them and helped about their emotional health as well? What would they be like? And so some of these people were very different. Some of these people were the best versions of who they were. And then some of them we just chose because we thought it was funny. And we did some of that too.
That's good. And you know what, there was never a point where I was like, oh, I don't think Elvis would say that. Do you know what I mean? Because this isn't the Buddy Holly story.
That's
this
right.
Isn't, Baz Luhrmann's Elvis.
Yeah.
Like you're taken into a completely, fictitious realm from jump, from the very beginning of the book. And so I was just happy to be interacting with these people in a modern day sense. And like, yes, seeing them in this secret agent kind of role. And again, like I won't spoiler alert anything, but
well, I am curious. Like you said that you were surprised. Like it's okay. You can give one spoiler or two. Like it's okay. Like what were some of your big surprises? What were you happy to see people showing up? You talked about that earlier.
Well, I was really happy to see some of the female artists show up. I was happy to see. I was most happy. Like I found myself as I'm turning pages and new characters are getting introduced to learn sort of what their special skill was. Right, like that was fun. Like one that I'll give away is Jimi Hendrix is the wheelman. He's the driver, right? Like he's the and all the agents are all trained up in everything really, but some have special skill sets. Buddy Holly was kind of the surveillance guy, and I love that because you think of Buddy Holly and he's sort of this like kind of nerdy like presence, that would be really easy to kind of infiltrate into, sneaking around a little bit and kind of blending in. And I also love too that these stars can kind of walk around in broad daylight with no problem at all because people are like, oh, they're dead. Like, yeah, this guy looks like Elvis, but Elvis is dead, so it doesn't matter. Yet the main character is kind of a regular guy and his death presents a little bit more of a challenging situation because like if somebody saw him on the street, that's different than if you see somebody who the whole world has accepted is dead, so I thought that was a really cool juxtaposition too. And then of course, just all the song references and all the movie lines that pop in. For a pop culture nerd like me, it's just a treasure trove on every page, really. Like you get something different every single time, every time I turned a page. And like I said, listeners, I'll post a link to the playlist that accompanies the book as well. But there were some gems in there that I hadn't thought about forever. I think I said to you guys in an email, you guys call out a song called Omaha by Counting Crows. And that August and Everything After album was on repeat when I was in college. Like I could have sang it. I probably still can sing it from beginning to end. Like loved it. And so it was super fun to see a song like that pop up. In addition to like the usual suspects that you think, oh, I'm probably going to get these songs because these rock stars are part of the DRS. So I think that's a good segue into our very last pick here. So Kyle, you're going to have to take us home with your second pick, which will be very illuminating in terms of one of the main characters of the book here.
Sure. My last pick is That'll Be the Day by Buddy Holly. Prior to writing this book, I knew who Buddy Holly was, familiar with his tunes. great 80s show, showing my age here, Quantum Leap. There was an episode where Sam, who was the guy who leaped into people's lives, leaps into the life of someone in the orbit of Buddy Holly. And he spends the whole episode, trying to figure out, why am I here? What am I here to fix? Because he would go back and change things from the past to make the future better. Yeah. And at the very end of the episode, it was genius. At the very end of the episode, there's a guy, they call him Buddy, and he's sitting on the porch and he's trying to sing a song. And he's going, Peggy Sue-wee, Peggy Sue-wee. And he's like, Buddy, have you ever thought about Peggy Sue? And he's like, Peggy Sue, Peggy Sue. And all of a sudden he leaps. So that's all he had to do was get him to sing the lyric Peggy Sue. And that got him to and it was so genius. And so that was kind of the extent of my, interaction with Buddy Holly till we started writing this book. And what we found about Buddy Holly and found so interesting is the reverence that everybody holds him in. All the guys that came after, the next generation of rock and roll, the Beatles, Elvis and he were kind of contemporaries. But just when you hear them talk about Buddy Holly, like just the reverence they have for him. And so we kind of wanted to bring that into the book in the way that everyone just universally loved him. He was, just a beloved figure. And, it's just kind of fun to imagine, what that dude would be like, if he faked his death. And he's one of those guys, so many of these rock stars, they died young. Some of them that are in our book died later on in life, and we got to see them change and evolve over time. We got to see Fat Elvis, which some say that was when he was at his most genius. He's sweating on the piano playing, Unchained Melody. But others say no, it's when he was young and handsome. That's so some of these like Buddy Holly, they're like encased in amber. We never got to see Buddy Holly have to suffer through the disco era. Like what would his disco album have been like? We never got to see Kurt Cobain. What would he be doing now? Would he be doing, acoustic dance, or would he be doing dance music? What would he be doing? Right. Like, who knows? Because tragically they left us too soon, and so
I can tell you one thing. I'm quite confident that Elvis Presley in 1999 would have written "Livin' La Vida Loca." That would have happened. If he hadn't written it, it'd been like Ricky Martin and Elvis Presley wrote this song, and he'd be getting a big cut of the mix.
That was definitely right up his alley for sure. Yeah. So yeah, that'll be the day. And also there's the, it's the kind of creepy prophetic piece of the song when he talks about that'll be the day that I die.
Yeah.
And, sure enough, not long after that, he and Richie Valens and Big Bopper and the pilot, they all died in a plane crash. Which again took them far too soon. That's just sort of the element of that song that kind of the man who wrote it, and sort of the interesting element of him speaking of his death in this song, which is a love song. It's kind of a creepy love song if you read the lyrics,
It is.
but it's just kind of fun how it all ties into our story of the dead rock stars.
Yeah, it's true. And Buddy Holly was one. I was super happy. Like you meet him immediately upon opening the first pages of the book. So we're not giving anything away here that Buddy Holly is kind of a prominent character. But for me, when I was a kid, my grandparents lived in Lubbock, Texas. And my dad went to high school there, went to Texas Tech. And so Buddy Holly's been ever present in my life.
So you like that first page line about us mentioning Lubbock, huh?
I sure did. And again, I love, anytime you're in Lubbock, if you go there today, there's still, monuments and effigies to Buddy Holly everywhere. And I loved kind of, again, getting to revisit him, not as the 1950s star that is sort of like enshrined in our mind, but as a person that is, functioning in the late 1990s. It was really fun to sort of see him and his friends, really, because that's how you get to know him throughout the book too, is how his friends are thinking of him. And it was just really fun. And I don't know if it was because I have such a deep connection to Buddy Holly that I was so immediately sucked in. But like I said, even if you're not connected to Buddy Holly or Elvis, there are so many rock stars that you guys pull from the grave for the book, that I think there really is something for everybody in here. And that leads me to sort of my final question to round us out is, I have to know, like I said, we talked a little bit before we recorded about, Ready Player One, Ernest Cline's book, and how rich that was with pop culture reference. I think yours is even more packed than that book, honestly.
Wow,
and
thank you.
I wonder how you guys did that. How did you narrow it down? Did you each get like a list of 5 rock stars that you absolutely had to have in there? Did you agree, like from the offset? How did it start? How did you narrow down? What was the framework that you built this around that allowed you to include all of these references?
Well, I think the true answer to the question is 2 heads are better than one. We both have a rich background of interests, of pop culture, knowledge and love, and so we just sort of both went for it, and we didn't really hold much back. We weren't at the point of like, well, maybe that's a little too much. Maybe there's a time or two when we try to maybe scale it back just a little bit. I don't know that anyone will ever remember that, but some of the things we went for anyways, about a quarter of the way through the book, we mentioned the old 90s TV show Wings. Does anyone remember Wings? Nobody remembers Wings.
They should.
But it's
I remember
in there.
Wings.
They should.
Yes. So good.
That's a cast, man. That's a cast.
It was. My mom loved that
cast.
show too. My mom, I remember sitting around watching Wings with my mom.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, and all the, like the Dumb and Dumber references too. Like I hadn't thought about Dumb and Dumber in a long time. And like that pops up. So yeah, there are so many. And that's the one thing that all of us like pop culture dorks have in common, right? Like we can talk about it forever. Like if you're into pop culture and it's something that you love, you can sit down with another person and literally talk for hours about one movie, one scene, one song, like they're all. And so I think that's why for me, I was like, there's so much here. How did they ever decide,
Well, the genre with which this story is, I mean, it's a ensemble, secret agent, action buddy kind of movie that's a book. I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing. We certainly didn't know how to write a movie, so we wrote a book. And we did the best we could with that. But with that, there's certain pieces that who's the leader? Who's the weapons expert? Who's the, if you're thinking about the A-team or whatever, you got these roles that you kind of play. And then we started to get into it. We're like, okay, what would they be like? What are their personalities like? Jimi Hendrix in particular is really fascinating because the image and the caricature we have of him looking back, who didn't live there, it was like the coolest dude ever. And he was just, lighting things on fire. And he was just, raw rock. But when you listen to him talk, he was eloquent and he was intelligent and he was suave. And so we were able to kind of take that and go, okay, what would he be like? He probably had a passion for, if he was so good and skilled as an engineer with a guitar, I bet he could be great with vehicles. Jim Morrison, to give a little spoiler away, Kyle likes to talk about this. Jim Morrison, for us, we really love the ideas of thinking about these characters as movie stars that had played them previously. And so Val Kilmer was a significant inspiration from his movie that came out in the late 80s, early 90s. Kyle could probably tell you exactly when it came out.
91.
91.
Yes.
And, that was such a revelatory role for him that it kind of, when you think about Jim Morrison, you think about Val Kilmer. And so in our story, because of Val's age and where he's at, Jimmy Morrison had taken a vow of silence. And that's because in our dream world, it'd be like, why couldn't Val play Jimi Hendrix? I mean, why couldn't Val play Jim Morrison? And so we did things like that because we thought they were fun for us. They were interesting.
Our protagonist in the story is Cole Denton. And you do a little math. He is our age pretty much. And so the stuff that we were into in 1999 is the stuff that Cole's into in 1999. The movies, the music, the quotes, the things like that really is a reflection kind of our twin, passions and interests. So, we didn't, I wish we could say that we had these designs and these great grand plans of how we're going to weave stuff in. It was just, a pure, does the story call for this? Is it funny? Does it make sense? Well, let's put it in the story. So that's kind of how, and just from our backgrounds and, and loves, that's how it all sort of ended up in there together to make the story what it is.
I loved it. It worked. It was super rich with references that really like took me back to that time and place and put a smile on my face every time. So thank you both so much for sharing what you're listening to. I thought your book was a ton of fun. And like I said, I was just living for all of the pop culture Easter eggs that pepper every single page. So well done there. And it's hard to impress me in the pop culture reference space because I do like to go deep, and I felt like, oh, these are worthy opponents here in terms of some pop culture sparring. I think we need to be at a trivia night one night, as long as we're all on the same team, and I think we'd probably be pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, we'd be taking home the victory for sure, taking home the W, as they say.
Let's do it.
Taking home. Well, listeners, as I mentioned, the book is a really good time. It's available now on Amazon, and it would make a great gift for a music lover on your holiday gift list. So definitely look on Amazon for the book, The Dead Rock Stars. It's just it's a quick read. It's I picked it up. When did I get the book, guys? Sunday, and I finished it last night. So no, Monday. I got it on Monday and finished it in like 3 or 4 days. You just don't want to put it down because every page something new is happening, and there's again another reference that's just making you smile. So definitely check it out. And as always, please be sure to follow, download, and share this show. And if you love listening, drop us a review on Apple or Spotify. Last but not least, to stay informed on all things Super Awesome Mix and What Are You Listening To, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix. Thanks for listening, and please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.